ACCA, Developing Professional Accountants.
One of the strategic decisions that a company needs to make is whether it should manufacture something, do something itself, or whether it should buy in from somebody else. Now, again, in management accounting papers, what we normally assume that we're looking at is we normally assume that we're looking at should we purchase a component. So something that we are going to use as part of our finished product. Should we make it ourselves or should we buy it from somebody else? Now, in this paper, you might have to think about that, but it could be anything that the company actually does. So should we, for example, do our own IT or should we outsource it? Should we do our own cleaning or should we outsource it? It's in effect, it's exactly the same decision. Making it yourself, doing it yourself, or buying it in from somebody else. So do we get a subcontractor to do something specialist or do we do it ourselves? So, whichever one of these you've got, it's basically the same idea. So, we have a company that manufactures a particular component. The cost of the component is as follows. $2.50 for materials, $1.75 for labour, $2.25 for variable overheads and $3 for fixed overheads, giving you a total of $9.50. So that's the cost of us doing it ourselves. However, there is an alternative. We could outsource the production of this. We could get somebody else to make it, and if we did, it would cost $6. So, should we carry on making it or not? It also says the production capacity would be unused. We'll come back to that in a second. Right, first thing then to remember is that when we are looking at the cost of manufacturing something, we are interested in relevant costs. Now, if we decide that we will stop manufacturing this product, we will not have to pay the $2.50. We will not have to pay the $1.75. We will not have to pay the $2.25. Why? Because all of those are direct costs. If you make a component, you need the raw materials, you need the labour, you need the variable overheads. Those three between them come to $6.50. But what about the fixed overheads? Well, if you remember, fixed overheads are simply the way that we add something to the cost of a product to enable us to collect enough money to pay, for example, the rent bill. So the idea is you might remember talking about apportioning overheads, allocating overheads, and then absorbing overheads. These overheads, the $3, are being absorbed. It does not mean that each time you make another item, you have to spend another $3. If that was the case, these would also be called variable. They're called fixed. So the $3 is completely irrelevant. It doesn't make any difference whether we make these products or not. The rent bill still needs paying. So the actual cost of making these products is $6.50. But remember, we can purchase them. For $6. What are you going to do? Well, the obvious answer, outsource. Get somebody else to make them for you. Stop doing it yourself. So you just look at the variable costs, ignore the fixed costs, and then that way you can then think which is actually better. What assumptions has the company made? Well, one assumption is that whatever they are purchasing, it will be the same quality. Because obviously, if they are buying it and it turns out not to be very good, then potentially they might not be able to manufacture their finished goods, or they might have quality issues with them. Customers might complain. So we are assuming that we can get these things at the same quality, and that might not be true. We are assuming that the supplier is stable. Now, what I mean by that is if we close down our production and perhaps we sell off all the machines and we get rid of the workers, what then happens if the supplier, who is going to sell them to us for $6, what happens if they go bankrupt? We now haven't got any supplies at all. We might need, therefore, to think about, well, what happens if the supplier can't supply us for whatever reason? You might also need to look at the supplier power. If this is a very important component and we must have it, particularly if we can't get it from anybody else, what could happen? We close down that bit of the factory, we sell the machines, we get rid of the staff, and in 6 months' time, the supplier says, actually, we're going to put the price up to $7. And because we are so powerful, you will pay it. Well, now we are worse off purchasing them. So we need to think about these kind of questions. Now, again, when you do management accounting, you don't tend to bother with these questions. Now we're linking it with strategy. Now we do. We might be making the supplier very powerful. From a strategic perspective, what should the company do? Well, I suppose it depends what the company's strategy is. If this component adds value, so the fact we make it ourselves, the fact we know it's done properly, maybe you carry on making it. After all, the saving is only 50 cents. $6.50 versus $6. It is a relatively small saving. And if you make the saving, you are then putting yourself in the hands of the supplier. You might decide it is not worth it. You might decide you would rather pay the extra 50 cents and make it for $6.50 yourself, rather than taking the chance of relying on somebody else for such a small saving. Now, if it was costing us $10 and we could buy it for $6, you might say, look, it's obvious, save $4, buy it. But the saving's not that big. We might also have problems. Maybe our customers, not only are our customers willing to pay extra because we've manufactured everything ourselves, but also maybe our customers would start complaining if we used somebody else's components. So there are strategic, potential non-financial issues that we also have to bring in before we make this final decision.